In the peaceful town of Pine Hill, the murder of Jennifer Johnson shook the community to its core. What seemed like a quiet and friendly neighborhood was torn apart by a tragic story of love, lies, and betrayal. Two couples, Daniel and Linda Garner, and Mark and Jennifer Johnson, found their lives tangled in a web of obsession and deceit, leading to a deadly end. Daniel Garner, a well-regarded architect with a warm personality, appeared to have an ideal marriage with Linda, a devoted schoolteacher. Their closest friends were Mark Johnson, a thriving financial advisor, and his wife Jennifer. The two couples weren't just neighbors, they shared deep bonds that extended beyond casual barbecues and weekend trips. The couples had also agreed to an open relationship, adding an element of thrill to their lives. But underneath this seemingly adventurous arrangement, emotions began to spiral out of control. Daniel became fixated on Jennifer, his attraction slowly turning into an unhealthy obsession, something his wife, Linda, couldn't ignore. Jennifer, noticing how intense Daniel's feelings had become, chose to end the arrangement, unaware of the deadly chain of events her decision would set off. Daniel and Linda Garner had been married for a decade, and to everyone around them, they seemed to have a stable and happy life. Daniel's career as an architect was thriving, admired for both his creative designs and his magnetic personality. Linda, a teacher for third graders, was adored by her students and admired by her coworkers. She and her husband lived in a lovely home on Maple Street, with a beautiful garden that Linda loved to care for. Mark and Jennifer Johnson moved to Pine Hill 5 years ago and soon formed a close friendship with the Garners. Mark, a financial advisor, was sociable and friendly, often the center of attention at gatherings. Jennifer, known for her stunning looks and captivating charm, was just as well liked. When the Johnsons moved in, they brought fresh energy to the neighborhood, and their bond with the Garners grew strong through shared hobbies and mutual admiration. The idea of wife-swapping first came up during a dinner party at the Garners' house. As the evening wore on and the wine flowed, the discussion shifted to open relationships. Surprisingly, rather than being met with shock, the idea sparked interest and curiosity among the guests. In the weeks that followed, the group talked more seriously about the idea, setting clear boundaries and rules to keep their primary relationship secure. Their first experience was a mix of awkwardness and excitement, with Daniel and Jennifer and Mark and Linda swapping partners for the night. The experience was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking, leaving them wanting more. What began as an occasional experiment soon became a regular aspect of their lives, bringing a new energy to both marriages. At first, the arrangement seemed to be working well. Both couples seemed happier and more connected, continuing their social activities and often hosting joint parties or going on vacations together. They kept their arrangement discreet, only discussing it in private settings or within their homes. The excitement of the arrangement created a thrilling atmosphere, and for a while it felt like they had found the ideal balance. However, over time, subtle shifts began to emerge, especially in Daniel's behavior. He started showing an increased interest in Jennifer, frequently seeking out opportunities to be alone with her. Linda noticed Daniel's growing preoccupation but decided to overlook it, hoping it was just a temporary phase. Mark also seemed unaware of the mounting tension. Meanwhile, Daniel's interest in Jennifer was evolving into something more intense and concerning, though the others remained unaware. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Jennifer, replaying their encounters in his mind and longing for more time with her. What had begun as a simple adventure was turning into a full-blown obsession, threatening to disrupt the lives of everyone involved. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer had moved beyond mere excitement. Daniel's feelings had grown into an all-consuming obsession. He found himself constantly thinking about Jennifer, his mind drifting to their encounters even during work meetings and family dinners. His architectural projects, once his main passion, now took a backseat to his intense desire for her. Daniel began seeking opportunities to be near Jennifer, volunteering for tasks Mark usually managed and inviting the Johnsons over more often. Linda noticed the shift in her husband's behavior. Initially, she thought it was just the excitement of their new lifestyle, but it soon became evident that Daniel's interest in Jennifer was surpassing their agreed boundaries. Daniel grew irritable and distant when they weren't with the Johnsons, often bringing up Jennifer's preferences, quirks, and habits in conversation. One evening, while cleaning up after a dinner party, Linda confronted him. His response was defensive, brushing off her concerns as mere jealousy. Linda, reluctant to upset the fragile balance they had created, chose to let it go but kept a closer watch on Daniel. Her suspicions intensified when she noticed him staring at Jennifer during gatherings, his gaze lingering longer than usual. Jennifer, too, began to sense Daniel's escalating obsession. At first, Jennifer felt flattered by Daniel's attention, but it quickly became uncomfortable. His touches grew more possessive, and his comments became more personal than appropriate. She brought her concerns to Mark, who dismissed them, thinking Daniel was merely being more expressive in his affections. Mark's indifference left Jennifer feeling alone with her worries. The situation reached a turning point during a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin that the couples had planned to reconnect and take a break from their daily routines. Instead of providing relief, the trip exposed Daniel's fixation even more. He monopolized Jennifer's time, insisting on private outings on the lake, leaving Mark and Linda behind. The tension was evident, and when Jennifer tried to distance herself, Daniel responded with subtle resistance. One night by the fire, Daniel crossed a line with a comment about leaving everything behind and starting anew, just the two of them. Jennifer, shocked and uneasy, quickly excused herself and went to bed early. Linda, having overheard the conversation, confronted Daniel once more. This time he was less dismissive but still refused to fully acknowledge the depth of his feelings. Linda's frustration mounted as she came to understand the full extent of Daniel's obsession. Linda loved her husband, but grew increasingly concerned that his obsession with Jennifer could ruin both their marriage and their friendship with the Johnsons. Despite her attempts to address the issue, Daniel's behavior became more erratic. He began following Jennifer outside their planned encounters, showing up at her yoga classes, and even visiting her workplace under the pretense of casual meetings. Jennifer's unease turned into fear. She confided in a close friend, who advised her to distance herself from Daniel as much as possible. Taking charge of the situation, Jennifer resolved to end the arrangement entirely. Jennifer hoped that ending the arrangement would help Daniel regain his senses and allow everyone to move on without further damage. One evening, while Mark was away on a business trip, Daniel arrived unannounced at the Johnsons' house. Though taken aback, Jennifer let him in, aiming to prevent any confrontation. In the living room, the tension was palpable. Daniel confessed his feelings, envisioning a future where they could be together openly. Jennifer, horrified, tried to reason with him, explaining that their arrangement was meant to be nothing more than a fleeting excitement. As Daniel's declarations grew more intense, Jennifer's fear shifted to anger. Understanding the urgency to protect her marriage and friendship with Linda, she firmly told Daniel that the arrangement was over. She insisted that he respect her boundaries and her marriage. Daniel, visibly shaken, tried to persuade Jennifer to change her mind, but she remained resolute. In the following days, Jennifer avoided him, hoping he would come to his senses. She also confided in Linda, who listened with a heavy heart. Linda recognized that Daniel's obsession had gone too far. Although she wanted to support Jennifer, she felt a conflicted loyalty to her husband. She promised Jennifer she would speak to Daniel in hopes of calming the situation. Despite her efforts, Daniel's obsession only grew stronger. Daniel began appearing at Jennifer's workplace, waiting for her after hours, and leaving messages declaring his undying love. Feeling increasingly unsafe, Jennifer decided to confront him one last time, hoping to make him understand the seriousness of his behavior. They met at a secluded park, away from prying eyes. Jennifer reiterated that their arrangement was finished and that his behavior was unacceptable. She pleaded with him to let go and move on. Daniel, unable to accept her rejection, became increasingly desperate. Daniel accused Jennifer of leading him on and manipulating his emotions. Despite his accusations, Jennifer kept her composure, firmly insisting that they end things and return to their marriages. Unbeknownst to them, Linda had followed Daniel to the park. Linda watched from a distance, her heart racing as she observed the confrontation. She saw the anguish on Daniel's face and the determination in Jennifer's. Although Linda knew this confrontation was unavoidable, she was anxious about what might happen next. As the argument intensified, Daniel's desperation turned into anger. Feeling personally betrayed by Jennifer's refusal to indulge his fantasies, he lashed out with harsh words, calling her names and blaming her for ruining his life. Jennifer, holding back tears, stood firm and refused to be intimidated. Linda, watching from the shadows, felt a surge of panic. Realizing she had to step in before the situation escalated further, she prepared to intervene. Linda emerged from her hiding place and approached them, her voice trembling as she called out to Daniel. The sight of her seemed to break through Daniel's rage, and he turned toward Linda, his expression a mix of confusion and relief. Seizing the opportunity, Jennifer walked away, determined to put as much distance between herself and Daniel as she could. Linda, now alone with Daniel, attempted to calm him down. She reassured him that they would find a way to move forward, but deep down, she knew their lives had been irrevocably altered. The affair had reached its breaking point, and Jennifer's decision to end the arrangement had triggered a series of events that could not be undone. As the dust settled, the full scope of Daniel's obsession and Linda's complicity began to emerge, leading toward a tragic and violent conclusion. The confrontation at the park had left Daniel in deep turmoil, with Jennifer's firm rejection and Linda's unexpected appearance having profoundly unsettled him. That night, Daniel returned home consumed by a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and despair. Despite Linda's attempts to calm him and soothe his troubled mind, he remained inconsolable. In the days that followed, Daniel's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Daniel swung between intense anger and deep despondency, skipping work and spending his days fixated on Jennifer's rejection and the injustices he felt he had endured. Linda, unable to reach him, found her own frustration and fear escalating. Linda realized something had to change, but she wasn't ready for the drastic turn of events that was about to happen. Meanwhile, Jennifer was focused on moving forward. She avoided all contact with Daniel, dedicating herself to her work and her relationship with Mark. Jennifer hadn't shared the full extent of Daniel's obsession with her husband, fearing his reaction and the potential fallout. She hoped that by severing ties, Daniel would eventually accept the end of their arrangement and leave her alone. However, one evening, she returned home from work to find Daniel waiting outside her house. Her heart sank at the sight of him, and she braced herself for another confrontation. Approaching cautiously, Jennifer's voice was steady but firm as she told Daniel to leave. Daniel, his eyes filled with desperation, begged her for one last chance to explain himself. Jennifer, sensing that the conversation was futile, tried to walk past him, but Daniel grabbed her arm. His grip was tight and painful, and she could see the madness in his eyes. She struggled to break free, her voice rising as she demanded that he let go. The commotion drew the attention of a neighbor, who came outside to investigate. Seeing the neighbor, Daniel released Jennifer and fled. Shaken and terrified, Jennifer thanked the neighbor before quickly retreating inside. Jennifer called Linda, hoping to resolve the situation without involving the police. Hearing the fear in Jennifer's voice, Linda agreed to meet the next day to discuss how to handle Daniel's increasingly unstable behavior. The following day, Linda and Jennifer met at a local cafe. Jennifer, looking exhausted and tense, recounted her encounter with Daniel and her escalating fears for her safety. Linda listened intently, her mind racing as she considered how to address the situation. She assured Jennifer that she would speak with Daniel and make it clear that their relationship was definitively over. After the meeting, Linda returned home to find Daniel in a state of agitation. Confronting him about the incident with Jennifer, her voice was a blend of anger and concern. Feeling cornered, Daniel lashed out, accusing Linda of taking Jennifer's side and betraying him. The argument grew more heated, and Linda, fearing for her safety, retreated to their bedroom. That night, Daniel's thoughts grew darker as he struggled to accept Jennifer's rejection and his wife's opposition. In his distorted thinking, Daniel believed that eliminating the source of his pain was the only solution. Convinced that if he couldn't have Jennifer, no one could, he decided to act on his dark thoughts. On a cold, clear night, Daniel made his way to the Johnsons' house. Knowing Mark was out of town and leaving Jennifer alone, Daniel broke in through a side window and made his way to the bedroom where Jennifer lay sleeping. Seeing her so peaceful and unaware only intensified his rage and desperation. He grabbed a kitchen knife and approached her, his mind a chaotic blend of love and hatred. Jennifer woke to find Daniel standing over her, the knife gleaming in the dim light. She tried to scream, but Daniel quickly covered her mouth, his grip firm and unrelenting. In a fit of rage, Daniel plunged the knife into Jennifer's chest, silencing her cries. As her life faded, Daniel stood over her, overwhelmed by a haze of conflicting emotions. After the murder, he fled the scene, his hands stained with Jennifer's blood. He returned home, trembling and incoherent. Linda quickly realized what he had done, and in a moment of twisted loyalty, she chose to help him cover up the crime. The life they had built and the secrets they had kept were now at risk. Linda knew they needed to act swiftly and decisively to survive. Driven by a twisted sense of loyalty and self-preservation, she took control of the situation, leading Daniel to the bathroom. She instructed him to strip off his blood-stained clothes and clean himself up. Linda's mind raced with the urgency of their situation. Understanding the need to act quickly to cover up the crime and protect their secret life, she moved with purpose. As Daniel stood under the hot shower, the water turning pink around his feet, Linda gathered his blood-stained clothes and placed them in a plastic bag. Linda scrubbed the floor where Daniel had walked, determined to remove any trace of blood. Once he was cleaned up, she sat him down and insisted he recount every detail of the night's events. Despite his emotional turmoil, Daniel provided a coherent account, his voice trembling under the weight of his actions. Linda quickly devised a plan. They needed to create a solid alibi and dispose of any evidence linking them to the crime. She called a trusted friend, fabricating a story that Daniel had been with her all evening, ensuring their alibi would be backed up. Linda drove to a secluded area outside of town, where she burned Daniel's blood-stained clothes and the murder weapon, hoping the fire would eliminate any remaining evidence. As the police questioned everyone in the neighborhood, including the Garners, Linda's alibi held up under scrutiny. Despite his visible distress, Daniel managed to avoid arousing suspicion. The investigation appeared to stall, with no solid leads pointing to the Garners. Despite their initial success in avoiding detection, the psychological toll of the murder weighed heavily on both Daniel and Linda. Daniel grew increasingly paranoid, convinced that the police were closing in on him. Daniel withdrew from friends and colleagues, isolating himself in a web of fear and regret. Linda, though outwardly composed, felt the strain of their secret weighing heavily on her. She became hypervigilant, meticulously analyzing every interaction and behavior for any signs of suspicion from those around them. The weeks following Jennifer's murder were filled with tension and deception for the Garners. Linda assumed the role of stabilizer, managing Daniel's paranoia while keeping up their public facade. She kept a close watch on the news for any updates on the investigation, feeling a sense of relief as the police appeared to have no solid leads. Linda understood that maintaining their cover required more than just an alibi. They needed to craft a narrative to divert attention from Daniel. She suggested that he should publicly show more distress over Jennifer's death, aligning with the community's grief to deflect any suspicion. At social gatherings and community meetings, Daniel played the role of the grieving friend. He spoke of Jennifer with a mix of fondness and sorrow, his eyes frequently welling up with tears. Mark, devastated and seeking answers, seemed to appreciate Daniel's apparent empathy. Unaware of his friend's involvement in his wife's death, Mark saw Daniel's mental state deteriorate further. Consumed by guilt, Daniel experienced nightmares and hallucinations, turning to heavy drinking in a futile search for solace. Linda, worried that Daniel might confess in a drunken state, kept a close watch on him, often staying up late to ensure he didn't leave the house. One evening, as Daniel slumped over a glass of whiskey, he broke down and confessed to Linda that he could no longer bear the guilt and needed to come clean. Panicked, Linda tried to calm him down and help maintain their composure, desperately seeking to prevent him from making a confession. Linda suggested they take a short trip out of town to a secluded cabin in the mountains, hoping the change of scenery would help Daniel regain some peace. The isolation offered a brief respite, allowing them to plan their next steps away from the constant pressure of the investigation. During their stay at the cabin, Linda emphasized the crucial importance of maintaining their secrecy. She coached Daniel on how to handle police questioning and public interactions, drilling him until he could respond without hesitation. Her relentless drive to protect their lifestyle and avoid imprisonment fueled her determination to keep their story consistent. Upon returning to Pine Hill, the Garners resumed their lives with a renewed sense of purpose. Daniel, though still haunted by his actions, managed to present a more stable front. Linda continued to oversee their interactions with the community, carefully ensuring they remained above suspicion. However, the cracks in their facade began to show. Friends and neighbors observed Daniel's increased drinking and erratic behavior, leading to whispers about his possible involvement in Jennifer's death. Linda, ever vigilant, worked tirelessly to quash the rumors, but she knew their time was running out. As the police investigation progressed, new evidence emerged, highlighting inconsistencies in Daniel's alibi. The Garners' meticulously crafted world teetered on the brink of collapse, with the truth inching closer to revelation. Detective Mitchell interviewed the Garners separately, scrutinizing their stories for any discrepancies. Linda's carefully crafted alibi withstood scrutiny, and Daniel's emotional state appeared consistent with that of a grieving friend. However, Detective Mitchell's instincts suggested there was more to the story. As the weeks went by, new evidence began to surface. Forensic analysis of Jennifer's phone records uncovered a series of increasingly desperate text messages from Daniel, revealing his obsession with her. Detective Mitchell brought Daniel in for further questioning, probing into the inconsistencies in his alibi and the nature of his relationship with Jennifer. Despite Daniel's efforts to adhere to Linda's coaching, his nervousness and evasive answers only intensified Mitchell's suspicions. The turning point came when a neighbor provided crucial information. They had seen Daniel's car parked near the Johnsons' house on the night of the murder and noted his suspicious behavior. This testimony, coupled with the forensic evidence and Daniel's erratic behavior, gave the police grounds to obtain a search warrant for the Garners' home. During the search, the police discovered remnants of the burned clothing and traces of blood that had seeped into the floorboards, despite Linda's thorough cleaning. This damning evidence, combined with the witness testimony and phone records, painted a clear picture of Daniel's guilt. As the net tightened around the Garners, Linda recognized that their carefully constructed facade was on the verge of collapsing. Linda realized that their only chance to avoid a lengthy prison sentence was to devise a new plan to shift the blame onto someone else. As the police closed in, Linda and Daniel faced the grim reality of their situation. The lies and deceit that once shielded them were now on the brink of unraveling, and the truth was poised to be revealed in a way they could never have anticipated. As the evidence against Daniel mounted, Detective Mitchell prepared for a decisive interrogation. She brought Daniel in for another round of questioning, presenting him with a comprehensive overview of the evidence, the phone records, witness testimonies, and forensic findings. Cornered and overwhelmed, Daniel began to crack under the pressure. Detective Mitchell pressed harder, suggesting that a confession might lead to a more lenient sentence. Unable to bear the weight of his guilt and the relentless questioning, Daniel finally broke down. Daniel confessed to killing Jennifer, detailing his obsession, the confrontation, and the moment he lost control. In his confession, he also implicated Linda, describing her role in covering up the crime. He recounted how she had assisted him in cleaning up, disposing of evidence, and creating an alibi. Detective Mitchell, seizing the opportunity to uncover the full story, had Linda brought in for questioning. Confronted with Daniel's confession, Linda initially denied any involvement. However, as Mitchell presented the detailed evidence from Daniel's account, Linda realized there was no escape. Her carefully constructed lies had finally unraveled. Linda admitted to helping Daniel, explaining that her actions were driven by a misguided sense of loyalty and fear of losing everything they had built. The trial of Daniel and Linda Garner captivated Pine Hill and the surrounding region. The courtroom was packed with reporters and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the conclusion of the tragic tale. Daniel, charged with first-degree murder, and Linda, charged with accessory to murder and obstruction of justice, both pled guilty to their respective charges. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Linda received a lesser sentence, but the weight of her actions and their consequences would forever haunt her. Linda, despite her role in the cover-up, received a lighter sentence due to her cooperation with the investigation and her previously clean record. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10. Mark Johnson, left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life, found some solace in the justice served but continued to mourn the loss of his beloved wife. A truthful crime case solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe.